How's it going, people? Today's dish is going to be shrimp scampi a la Corazon, because my last name's Hart. It's just that simple. Next up, the ingredients list. So let's go over the ingredients, shall we? Obviously, if you're going to do shrimp scampi, you need shrimp. I want to go for the biggest size I can get typically, because it's just that much more, makes the meal that much more enjoyable to have nice large pieces. But for a more economical choice, you can go for the ones that are usually like 31 to 40 per pound. I always go for the ones where you have to peel them yourself, and that way I also make sure I work on getting the tail off, because I hate having to fuss with something like that while you're actually in the middle of enjoying the meal. So starting from this side, butter. Shrimp scampi, you're going to need butter, especially since we also put it in pasta when we're done. Don't worry about having too much butter, because you've got the pasta that you're going to be putting it into when you're all done. It blends and coats all the pieces of the pasta very well and makes a nice savory flavor to it, and disperses the flavors that you're going to see here that build up in a second. So in your pan, you start off with essentially a whole stick of butter, pretty much, especially since you're going to put all the pasta in as well. Put a hefty amount of oregano on top of the butter, then a little bit of basil. Whenever I do oregano, I always put a little bit of the sweet basil with it as well. They're kind of like cousins. One kind of takes the edge off the other. Thing to remember before you start your shrimp scampi, the thing that you always end up forgetting, you got to have capers, and you need to have your limes, or lime juice, or frozen lime juice too. Typically I do whole garlic and just press it through a mincer, but we didn't have that at the moment, and the store near me that I go to didn't happen to have it, so minced it is for today. There's another little step with garlic I'm going to mention when we get to the cooking phase. Traditional shrimp scampi, what is added to give it its coloration is paprika and cayenne pepper. For myself, cayenne pepper gives me a real bad acid and a real painful heartburn, so I have to modify it, hence the estilo Corazon I mentioned. But what I do is I use paprika's cousin, achiote, or annatto, as we call it in the United States. You can find it like that, mortar pestle, turn it into ground, you're good to go. In the beginning, well, we'll get into the cooking phase, but in the beginning, I like to do a low and slow, and with a little bit more heat than I would when I actually have the shrimps in there. And I like to brown the garlic that's added to it. No more than like a tablespoon, or I'm sorry, teaspoon of the garlic. And make sure to get it good, nice and brown. It takes out the acidic or hot of it, so it's less troublesome for persons like myself who have problems with acid reflux. Another addition that's my own thing is occasionally I'll usually put a little bit of chicken bouillon in there, because as it spreads throughout the mixture of the oil and the extra virgin olive oil, it tends to coat the pasta when you're all done and give it an even more savory quality about it that people just really enjoy. It makes people just blow through their meal and nothing flat. It's awesome. As I'm adding the pasta into the dish, or actually before adding the pasta in, when I have it slow cooking the shrimps and you're observing how much curl, you want at least pretty much full curl, maybe a little bit more than that. You don't want to go too much on shrimp, because when you do, you get chewy and rubbery, and you kind of want to avoid that as best you can. But with shrimp, I'll season with Lowry's, and since you're going to be adding the pasta after, I tend to go as light as I can for salts because of my blood pressure. But when you're cooking for others as well, you'll need to be usually adding more for their taste buds instead. And then since I add pasta to the whole thing after, you have to go a little bit higher than it seems comfortable for you initially, but it works itself out when all of the contents blend and mix throughout all the pasta when you're done. And then in our family, to make mama like something, you got to put a little bit of sriracha in there. It's just the smallest little bit. You might even say like that much. But magically it makes my family like the foods. And I think that's about it. This time I'm going to try adding sun-dried tomatoes, just as a happenstance. It just sounded like an interesting idea to add to it. Especially since the butter oil mixture that gets in there takes on a very red, orange quality to it because of the annatto. And let's get this part. All right. you've gathered your ingredients. Now it's time to peel the shrimp. Typically I only need like 2 bags, aka 2 pounds of shrimp for it, but today I just feel like making it even meatier and it'll look nicer on camera, so 3 pounds total. Sieve in the sink ready to receive. One ready to receive the peeled off shells as you've taken the defrosted pieces. And I always try to carefully take off this tail as well. I don't want to have to be fussing with something when I'm eating. I enjoy the meal that much more without it. You want to have another receptacle for the peeled pieces of shrimp because you don't want to use the one you don't want to use the sieve because that water, you'll approach the pan over there, you're going to have the hot oil, the hot butter in there, and so you'll have splatter coming up and hurting yourself. So definitely avoid that. And third bag. Of course, that's the one that's going to be tricky to open on camera. We have a ways of making you talk, buddy. One of the reasons you get to have it always having the EDC on you. In there. Sheep packaging. Oh, look at that. That's beautiful. Basically just running water. They're flash frozen. It gets over and done with relatively quickly, but you got to kind of knead to get the ones that are on the bottom hiding up into the front of the stream of water so you can get frosted quick. Alright, a little fast forward. You got them defrosted. It comes peeling. It's easy. Just grab a finger between finger and thumb. Usually comes right off just like that. Pick your one to dump the shells. Pick your one to dump the whole shrimp. Lather, rinse, repeat as far as this goes. And you don't want to pull too rapidly on the tail, otherwise a lot of times it'll rip off and you'll waste that good piece right there. Okay, phew. Usually you enlist the help of the kids to help you with peeling that, get them used to the idea of working in the kitchen. Gives them something fun to do. Rinse off the remaining shell pieces from your sieve. Then do one more rinse of the peeled shrimp. You want to get all those little pieces of leftover remnants of the deveining out of there, just to make sure that you get nice clean pieces that don't have any of that affecting the taste when you're all done. Alright, so since we got the shrimps all nice and peeled, defrosted, we now need to start with the melting of the ingredients. Let's see, I have up to 9 degrees on the rotation on the knob on this particular stove. You're talking about you need somewhere in the neighborhood of 4, 3.5 for most of your stuff when you're melting. And then once it's all melted, you probably want to drop it back down to a 3 or 3.5. Relatively low flame. It's most about giving things time to marinate with each other and get all the flavors mixing together. So, like I said, this is going to be 3 pounds of shrimp. It's going to be a significant amount, and plus you mix it with the pasta when you're all done. So, I need to put in an entire stick of butter. It sounds like a lot when you hear somebody saying that, but by the time all the ingredients get into it and it spreads out across all those shrimp and that pasta over there, it's really not that lot at all. Also, for a side dish that pairs really well with this, just some simple canned peas. You melt those with like a tablespoon of butter. 1 can, 1 tablespoon. And since there's the capers also already within this mixture that you're going to see in the pan and everything, and sporadically throughout your meal, when you then mix the peas in with it, if you have children that could be a little apprehensive to some of the little bitter pieces that are the capers, they won't think anything of it and they'll tear right through it. Alright. Oregano. It's going to be a hefty amount of oregano because remember, you got 3 pounds of shrimp we're going through. Personally, I've just always done this whole thing of decorating the tops of the sticks of butter with it. Makes it fun. Why not? Again, you're looking at the amounts that I'm putting and you might be thinking to yourself, oh my god, that's an unholy amount, but it really isn't once everything spreads around and the oil and butter mixture does its thing. Actually, before I put the oil in, probably other pizzas too. The other thing I always forget about with the capers as I walk off camera, which is a big no-no, is A lot of the times when you buy capers, they're a real small glass that you can't even fit anything to. So if you have a baby spoon from way back in the day, keep that sucker around. It'll come in handy. And one of the beautiful things about making shrimp scampi at your own house is that you can go heavy on the capers, and you're going to want to do that, especially since we mix it with the pasta. It may seem like a bit, but it's not. Because when you put in your lime juice later, the acidity of the lime juice and the tart of these ingredients kind of like even each other out, especially as the heat becomes applied to them. I don't have a tablespoon at the moment, but I'm going to put approximately a tablespoon of minced garlic, which is quite a bit actually. That's pretty powerful stuff. So another reason why I allow it time to do its thing among the ingredients that are going to be in here. And I put just enough olive oil so that all the ingredients can fan out across the base of the pan that you happen to be utilizing. Since I'm going to be adding the sun-dried tomatoes, I'm going to skip trying the tomato bouillon this time, and just a hair of chicken bouillon. Always pour into your cap first so you don't overdo it and have too much come out that you didn't intend on. That's fine. Cayenne pepper normally? Not for me, thank you very much. Sriracha. And just like the size of your thumb knuckle. Oh, hello, that could have been bad. Glad we caught that. That's it. That's about all it takes. Remember, because it's going to disperse after you stir up all the ingredients. And then the one that gives it the lovely color, the achiote. Annatto. Whoops. Bumped the camera. That's a joy. 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll say 4. A couple of them were small pinches. Trying to make up for it. All right. That's most of the stuff. Now we're going to do the lime juice and get that in there. Of course, I rinse the surfaces of them because they're from our own tree out front. But hey, no pesticides, right? Cool deal. I mean, another thing you can do also, since we have a tree and we end up harvesting a lot. Oh yeah, I love it when. That's another thing I love about doing it at home. You can put extra amounts of the lime juice in, and you get you get that hint of the lime throughout it. You know, and when you go out to eat, they don't really put enough, in my opinion. And it's a cautious thing. You don't want to put too much. You get that just a little too much, and then you have to balance it out with some of the other ingredients like your salts. Start with 2, see how you like it. Obviously, it can vary too by size of lime and how much juice the particular lime happens to squeeze out for you. And I typically enjoy a little bit of accent. I know that's not for everybody, so I want to make sure I made note of that to y'all. Actually, when it comes to putting on the Lowry's, I like to do that after the shrimps are already in there. The reason why is because it gives me a better visual cue of how much is actually falling out into the dish. And like a dork, I didn't fetch all of the tools that were going to be necessary, such as the spatula. Be sure to get you one that's got the little holes within it so that the solution can slosh around while you're doing the mixing chores. And I'm just going to give that time. Might even bump up the volume a little bit on the flame. You see how it started to bubble there? You want to give that time for that garlic to brown a little bit. You don't want it to look burnt, but just enough browning to it that it takes that hot off the garlic. And while this is happening, that flavor is mixing with the lime, it's mixing with the caper, and all those other ingredients like the oregano. It's also toning down the oregano too, because that quantity of oregano would be, for someone like me, a little bit problematic as far as acid's concerned. But that's where the heat comes in and does an amazing thing. And also the butter helps to carry those flavors around so that when you later on splash in your drained pasta into this mix and then fold it with your spatula, you get a nice even coating of all the flavor everywhere in the dish, and so each bite is just amazing. Derp! I talk about on camera adding sun-dried tomatoes to the mix, and then I don't put them in. Fire 'em. Let's see, I don't want to go too crazy with this because I don't know how it's going to affect the overall outcome. I'll keep it low for now. See how I like it and when the dish comes out. Alright, we'll check back in later with this once the garlic looks more apropos, so I can show the camera what the colors look like on that. Alright, some notes. Got the water started for the pasta. I'm going to be adding to that in a second. You should be already able to see on camera how we've got a more brown appearance to the mixture, and I still need to give the garlic a little bit more time. Like I said, I want it to look pretty golden brown, not burnt looking, but just before burnt looking, before I go and add the shrimps on into the mixture. And that's so everything can get calmed down before I add the shrimps in. And then when I add the shrimps in, I'm going to be turning the heat down so it isn't so violent like that, because you need time. You always want to go nice and slow on your shrimp so you can pull it out just right when you get the right amount of curl. And also, for most foods in general, if you can cook them on the slower side, you tend to preserve more of their nutritional value, and that's important, especially in these COVID times. Little side note: when you take your peas out of the micro, you want to make sure to blend all that butter and make sure it gets down in there in the heat inside all the peas and melts nice and evenly. That's letting us know that the pasta got to the 8 minutes they recommend for al dente. I'm just going to go ahead and shut the heat off on that for a moment, but I'll give it a little more time to get a little softer than that. I will add it to here and maybe let it roll for another minute, 2 minutes when I first put it in, to ensure that the flavors in all that broth and liquid get sucked on into the pasta once we do add it in there. And did a taste wipe off of the spatula, and oh yes, I'm kind of liking the way the sun-dried tomatoes gave it a different nuance too. That's pretty awesome. Regarding the pasta, I typically go with the mini farfalle. It's a right size and blends in well with the pieces. Doesn't overwhelm the dish like the larger farfalles do. I don't think I'd want to put shells or something like that. It would look too clumpy. And always with your pasta, you want to do filtered water. You need to add a little bit of oil so you don't get that frothing up that you do sometimes with pasta when it hits the hot water. Very little, just like the size of a nickel or a quarter. And then always a little bit of your regular old salt. You know, it doesn't have to be fancy kind of kosher salt or anything like that with this, because you're just going to be dumping this water anyway. That's it. Like I said, it's going to be dumped anyway, it doesn't matter. It just helps to prevent all that violent frothing up that can sometimes happen. Like, you'll have that happen with udons a lot too. What I use there to prevent it is taking the udons and stirring them in the water before dumping them in, so it gives it half a chance to wick off that outer coating of starches. Alright, while we're doing that, this is getting pretty close to what I was kind of hoping to have. Now I'll give a little more time on that one, just a little. I won't turn it down though. I don't risk having that burnt. Alright, let's do a quick check-in. We've had the pasta sitting for its second minute after the fire's been off. You see we're already starting to get nice curling going on with the shrimps. But I want them a little bit more, because since I don't get the cooked shrimps, I never get cooked shrimps for doing a dish like this. You always want to be the one cooking it yourself, because that gets the flavors pulled into the flesh of the shrimp. So each bite through and through just has all of your work coming through and making that other person's life be happy. for that dinner they're sitting down to. Oh yes, this is looking good. Oh, thank you. Heck yeah. Cool. Time to dump the water on this and have it standing by ready to add into that. And as we saw there, it's getting pretty close. I like a little more curl on the tip of the tail. We'll be there in a moment. Okay, a few more minutes later, we're starting to get the nice curl action going on. The tips are starting to do that curling over. Everything's looking really good. So I think it's time for the final fold. Again, the whole time it's been on like 2.5, really, really low. Give you an idea for what kind of flame we're looking at. And with the top on, of course, so the steam kind of helps things out. Here we go. Your spatula to help you so you don't have any splashdowns. And you can see what I was talking about how there's such a great amount more of material for the spices and the butter and the olive oil to be dispersed through once you add the whole mixture together. So since we're so very full, first of all, make sure you pick a pan that's big enough for the level of ingredients, the quantity of ingredients that you're going to add in here, high enough to keep you from having issues with parts of it slopping over the side. That could be a problematic thing sometimes after you add the pasta in there. It's going to take a lot of folding. So again, we got 3 pounds of shrimp and a box of the pasta. But you can see the size I was talking about, how the size of the mini farfalle doesn't dominate the dish and allows you to see the shrimps. So visually much more appealing. I wouldn't want a noodle type dish. It wouldn't look right with this particular one. And just from my previous experience, it looks nice and wetted up on the noodles. Let's try. Oh heck yeah. Interesting. Dried tomato adds an interesting little change to it. And yeah, the salt level, as I was saying, just a little bit higher than what you feel comfortable with for you personally for a taste, just before you dump in all this, and then do a taste check like I did right there and see if, when it comes to you enjoying it and serving it to your family, if you might need to add a little bit more at a time. Every time you add, gotta fold, fold, fold. You see I've let it be here now for, oh, I don't know, probably looking at 2 minutes now since I've started this and added in the pasta, but we're pretty much done here. So make sure when you serve, you get a healthy amount of them to be on top, present to your guests. And as you can see here, it's doing a good job of sucking in all that flavor, and it's coating nicely all the pasta. That's exactly what we want. I think we can call this done. Now time to plate. Okay, so this isn't the most, wildly visual plate that you can do, but it's not about that. It's about getting that savory, buttery, salty thing together with the annatto, the capers, just all dancing together. And you'd be surprised how yummy the sweet peas are. And most users eventually end up blending it in with the whole dish anyway, and they just get severely nom-nom with it, like a shark feeding on some fish. And here you go. Hope it works out for you guys when you try it at home.